The air was heavy with smoke and dust, the kind that made every breath feel like a burden. Torches burned along the walls of the alien slave market, casting long shadows that made the place look more like a dungeon than a marketplace. The sound of chains rattling mixed with the cries of merchants shouting prices. Beings of all kinds, humanoid, reptilian, insectoid, walked between the rows, bartering not for goods, but for lives. Among the many captives stood a young alien girl. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim torchlight, a pale silver glow that set her apart from others. Her eyes were wide with fear, glowing faintly blue as she scanned the crowd. Shackles bit into her wrists, and her body trembled from hunger and exhaustion. She had already lost hope. The auctioneer's voice roared above the crowd. Next, a rare one. Strong body, young age. She will last long under labor or other uses. The alien girl lowered her head, tears forming in her eyes. She had heard those words before. They always meant pain. She thought of all the stories whispered among the slaves. Humans, when they appeared here, were the cruelest of all. They didn't buy for work, they bought for experiments, for torture, for the kind of nightmares no one ever survived. And then she saw him. A middle-aged human walked forward through the crowd. His clothes were plain, travel-worn, and covered with dust, but he carried himself with calm confidence. His face was lined with age and experience, and his eyes seemed heavy with secrets. He was the only human in the marketplace that night, and when the girl's eyes met his, she froze. Whispers spread among the crowd. A human here, why? They don't usually buy from our markets. Maybe he's here for something special. The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She pressed her shackled hands to her chest, silently begging the universe not to let his gaze linger on her. But it did. He looked at her, and unlike the others, his expression was unreadable. No lust, no hunger for power, no cruelty, just silence. The auctioneer grinned, sensing interest. You there, human. A rare treasure, yes? Do you wish to bid? The man didn't answer immediately. His hand moved slowly to the pouch at his side. The girl's heart sank. No, please no. Not him, anyone but him. 50 credits, the man said calmly. Gasps broke out. Other bidders shouted higher offers, but he stood still, eyes locked on the girl. The crowd grew tense. Why would a human fight so hard for her? Suspense built as the price rose higher and higher. Finally, the man's voice cut through the chaos. 150 credits. The marketplace went silent. No one else could match that price. The hammer fell, chains rattled, and the girl's fate was sealed. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But the guards dragged her forward and shoved her to the human's feet. She looked up at him, eyes wet with terror. He's going to hurt me. That's what humans do. That's what they all do. But instead of grabbing her with rough hands, the man did something strange. He pulled a cloak from his shoulders and draped it over her trembling body, covering her silver skin from the eyes of the crowd. Stand, he said simply. His voice was not harsh. It was not kind either. It was steady. The girl obeyed, though her legs were weak. She expected him to chain her neck, to drag her like an animal. But he only guided her with a hand on her shoulder, pushing gently toward the exit. The cloak shielded her from the cruel stares, but not from her fear. Every step felt heavier than the last. She wanted to ask him why. She wanted to know what kind of torture awaited her. But her throat closed with fear, and no words came. As they left the market, the noises faded. Behind them, laughter and voices grew distant, replaced by the cold night wind. The girl felt the cloak tighten around her shoulders as the man adjusted it to keep her warm. The gesture confused her even more. Why cover me? Why protect me? Her mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps he wanted her alive and healthy before breaking her. Perhaps he wanted to trick her, make her believe in kindness before showing the truth. She didn't know. She couldn't trust that the human said nothing as they walked into the dark streets beyond the market. His silence was worse than cruelty. It left her trapped in her own imagination, guessing his intentions. She glanced up at him once more. His face was unreadable, eyes fixed on the road ahead. But deep inside her, a small spark of doubt flickered. Could it be that he was not what she feared? No, she shook her head. He was human. And humans were monsters. Still, as the night grew colder, she pulled the cloak tighter around herself. And for the first time in years, she felt a strange, fragile thing she didn't recognize at first. It was the faintest shadow of safety. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of damp stone and smoke from the slave market fires. The human walked with steady steps, his cloak still draped over the alien girl's thin shoulders. She followed because she had no choice, but each step felt like a march toward her doom. Her heart beat wildly. Why didn't he chain me? Why doesn't he drag me like the others did? The silence between them was heavy. No words, no explanations, only the sound of boots against stone. Finally, they reached a quiet alley where the noise of the market faded into the distance. A single moon glowed above, bathing the streets in silver light. The girl's fear grew stronger. This was it, she thought. Now away from the crowd, he would show his true face. But he only stopped, looked at her, and said one word, "Hungry?" The question struck her harder than a whip. She stared at him, confused. Hungry? No human had ever asked her that. Her lips trembled, but she dared not answer. She lowered her eyes, expecting the question to be a cruel trick. The man sighed, reached into his pack, and pulled out a small ration of bread and dried meat. He broke it in half and offered the softer piece to her. She flinched when his hand moved close, but he did not force it into her mouth. He only waited, hand extended. Her stomach growled loudly. She hated herself for it. Slowly, with shaking hands, she reached for the food. The moment her fingers touched it, she pulled back, half expecting him to strike her for daring to take it. But his hand remained still, patient. With a small gasp, she snatched the bread and clutched it tightly, as if it might disappear. She ate quickly, not tasting, only swallowing. Tears ran down her face as she chewed, because she realized something terrifying. This food. It was kind. And kindness was more frightening than cruelty. The human sat down on a broken stone block, eating his own share slowly, calmly. He did not look at her like a master, nor like a monster. His eyes seemed far away, lost in thoughts she could not understand. Why? She whispered, her voice hoarse. It was the first word she had spoken since being dragged from the market. He glanced at her but said nothing, her fear twisted into anger. She clenched her fists, breadcrumbs falling to the ground. Why didn't you chain me? Why feed me? What do you want from me? Her voice cracked, echoing in the empty street. For a long time, he did not reply. Then, in a low voice he said, "Not now. You will know in time." That answer shook her more than silence. "In time?" She repeated, her voice trembling. You are playing with me. You want me to believe you are good, so I don't fight when you—" She could not finish the sentence. The images in her head were too dark. The man stood up. His shadow stretched long under the moonlight. "We need to move," he said firmly. "It's not safe here." He walked ahead, not looking back. The girl hesitated. She could run. She could try to escape down another path. But where would she go? Her wrists were raw from chains, her body weak from hunger. If the guards caught her, she would be beaten. If the slavers caught her, they would sell her again. And so, with bitter fear in her heart, she followed. They walked for hours through the narrow streets until the walls of the city grew distant. The open fields stretched before them, lit by starlight. The air was colder here, fresher. For the first time, she saw the world beyond her prison. the human set up a small camp by a rocky hill. He gathered wood, struck sparks with flint, and soon a fire flickered to life. The girl sat far from the flames, clutching the cloak tightly around her, watching every move he made. He roasted a strip of meat over the fire and then placed it on a flat stone near her. She didn't move. "Eat," he said simply. She shook her head. "Poison?" she whispered. His eyes narrowed. "If I wanted you dead, I would not waste food." The words carried no emotion, but they were true. Slowly, she reached for the meat and ate. It warmed her empty stomach, but her mind stayed restless. Hours passed. The man sat by the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames. He seemed lost in thought, whispering softly to himself. The girl strained to hear and caught a few words. Names. A woman's name. A child's name. His voice cracked when he said them, like someone haunted by ghosts. She froze. Does he mourn someone? For a moment, she saw him not as a monster, but as a man broken by something unseen. She shook her head violently, rejecting the thought. No, this was a trick. Humans were cruel. They always were, and yet, as the fire warmed her cold body and the cloak shielded her from the night, she realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life as a slave, she did not feel completely afraid. The stars stretched endlessly above them, scattered across the night sky like glowing dust. The alien girl followed the human in silence, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her bare feet ached against the rocky ground, but she dared not complain. A slave who complained was punished. That was the only rule she had ever known. Yet this man, this human, had not raised his hand against her once. He hadn't shouted, hadn't chained her, hadn't treated her like property. That confused her more than cruelty ever could. They walked for hours until the walls of the city were no more than shadows behind them. A chill crept into the air, and she pulled the cloak tighter around her shoulders. She hated the comfort it gave her, hated that she felt shielded under something offered by him. This is how they break you, she told herself. They make you feel safe before they hurt you. The human finally stopped when they reached the edge of a small forest. Tall, dark trees rose above them, their branches whispering in the wind. He dropped his pack and began setting up camp without a word. She watched from a distance, expecting him to order her around, but he didn't. He struck flint against stone until a spark caught, and soon a fire flickered to life. The warmth drew her closer despite her fear. She sat at the very edge of the light, watching him roast strips of dried meat. At last he looked at her. Eat. Again, the word was simple. No force, no command, just an offering. He placed a small piece of food on a flat stone near her and returned to his seat. Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Her chest tightened with frustration. "Why are you doing this? You bought me. You own me. So why are you feeding me like I am not?" Her voice cracked. She couldn't finish the thought. The man turned the meat slowly over the fire, his face unreadable. "Because you're alive," he said finally. The words struck her like thunder. She didn't understand them. Alive? That was not a reason. It was nothing. Still, his calm voice carried a weight she couldn't ignore. Suspicion gnawed at her. Perhaps he was fattening her for something worse. Perhaps he wanted her strong before the torture began. She shoved the food into her mouth quickly, swallowing hard, as if speed might protect her. When she finished, she glanced at him again. He wasn't watching her. He stared into the flames, eyes distant, lips moving as if whispering secrets to the fire. She leaned closer, straining to hear. At first, it was only fragments, broken words, soft and aching. Then she caught a name. A woman's name. Then another, a child's. His voice cracked when he said it, and the pain in his tone made her chest tighten. Her fear faltered, replaced by confusion. Is he mourning? Is he like me? No. She shook the thought away. He was human. He was her enemy. He had to be, but when his hand trembled slightly, clutching the cloak tight around his shoulders, she saw something she had never seen in a master before: vulnerability. The night grew colder. She shivered, teeth chattering. Without a word, he rose, took another blanket from his pack, and placed it near her. Not on her, not forced. Just near enough for her to take if she wished. She stared at it for a long time, expecting a trap. Finally, she reached for it with shaking hands. It was warm, soft, smelling faintly of smoke and earth. She pulled it around herself, and for a moment, her body stopped trembling. Her eyes drifted back to the man. He had already returned to his place by the fire, his face lit by orange glow. He looked older now, not monstrous, not terrifying, just tired. The girl hugged the blanket tightly. Her mind screamed at her not to trust him, not to be fooled. And yet, deep inside, a dangerous thought whispered, maybe he is not like the others. That thought scared her more than anything else. So she lay awake long into the night, watching him, waiting for the moment his mask would fall and the cruelty would show. But the man never moved against her. He only sat, staring into the fire, lost in memories she could not reach. And in the silence of the forest, for the first time in years, she allowed her eyes to close, not in chains, not under whips, but under a blanket and a fire. She hated that she felt safe, and yet, she did. The fire had burned low, leaving only glowing embers. The alien girl stirred awake, her body wrapped in the blanket he had left for her. She blinked against the faint morning light that crept through the forest trees. The human was already awake. He sat near the fire pit, sharpening a blade with steady, deliberate strokes. His expression was calm, but his eyes were shadowed, heavy with thoughts she could not read. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around her. Why do you keep giving me these things?" she asked, her voice small. He didn't answer at first. The sound of the blade against stone was the only reply. Finally he said, "Because you need them." The simplicity of the words both comforted and frustrated her. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "Why buy me at all? If you only wanted to feed me and give me warmth, why not leave me there? Why spend your coins?" His hand paused mid-stroke. His jaw tightened. For the first time since she had been with him, she saw something raw in his face pain. He put the blade down and stared into the distance, past the trees, past the world itself. "Because once, someone I loved was taken, and I couldn't save her." His voice was low, each word heavy like a stone falling into still water. The girl's heart skipped. She leaned closer. "Who?" He did not look at her. "My daughter." Silence stretched between them. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She thought of the name she had heard him whisper to the fire, the child's name. The grief that cracked his voice. He finally stood, picking up his pack. "We should move. It's not safe to stay too long in one place." But as they walked, her mind would not let go of his confession. A daughter, he lost his daughter. The idea twisted inside her chest. She had always believed humans were heartless, cruel creatures without love or grief. But here was one who carried sorrow like a chain around his soul. The path through the forest was rough, roots clawing at the earth like skeletal fingers. Her weak legs stumbled often. Each time, she braced herself for the strike that never came. Instead, the man would pause, offer his arm, and let her steady herself before continuing. Once, when she tripped on a loose stone and fell hard, she expected anger. Instead, he knelt beside her, checking her scraped knee. His hands were rough but careful, tearing the strip from his cloak to bind the wound. "Why?" she asked again, her voice trembling. "Why do you care?" His eyes met hers then. For the first time, she saw them clearly, not the cold eyes of a master, but the weary gaze of someone who had carried loss too long. "Because no one cared for my child when she was taken," he said softly. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to look away, to hold on to her fear, but something inside her shifted. They continued walking until they reached a small stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, a rare beauty after so many days of darkness. The girl knelt to drink, and for the first time, she did not feel like a prisoner. When she looked up, the man was sitting nearby, staring at the stream with a faraway look. His hands trembled slightly as he touched a small pendant hanging around his neck. The girl leaned closer, curiosity breaking through her fear. "What is that?" she asked. He hesitated, then opened his hand to show her. Inside was a small locket, dented and worn. When he pressed it open, she saw a faded picture, an alien woman with kind eyes, holding a little child in her arms. "My family," he said. His voice cracked. "They were taken, sold. I searched, but—" His words broke off. He closed the locket quickly, as if the memory burned too much to bear. The girl felt a strange ache in her chest. She had been sold, too. Torn away from her family, from a home she barely remembered. For the first time, she felt a connection, not of species, but of pain. But fear still chained her heart. What if? This is all lies? What if he tells me this to make me trust him? That night, as they rested by another fire, she lay awake again, listening. The man whispered those names once more, his wife, his daughter. His voice trembled with sorrow, not cruelty. The girl turned away, tears stinging her own eyes. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to see him as a monster. But every whisper of his past made that harder. And though she swore she would not let herself believe, a dangerous thought grew stronger inside her heart. What if he is not my captor, but my savior? The forest was alive with sound-rustling leaves, distant bird calls, the soft crunch of footsteps on fallen branches. For 2 days, the girl and the human had traveled deeper into the wilderness. Each night, the fire grew smaller, the man more cautious, as if he knew something was following. On the 3rd morning, the truth came. The girl woke to the sound of low voices. Not his voice. Others. She froze under her blanket, heart pounding, eyes darting to the human. He stood at the edge of the clearing, crouched low, staring into the trees. His hand gripped the hilt of his blade. "Hunters," he whispered. Her blood turned cold. From between the trees, shadows moved 3 figures, armed and armored. Their eyes glowed faintly under their helmets. Slavers. They had tracked them. "There!" one shouted, pointing at her. "The human has the girl." The girl's legs refused to move. Fear crushed her chest, memories of chains and whips filling her mind. She was theirs again. This was the end. But before they could reach her, the human stepped forward, sword flashing in the dim light. His voice cut through the air like steel. "You will not take her." The hunters laughed. "One man against us? Fool!" Then they attacked. The girl clutched the blanket around her, watching in horror as the human met them head-on. His blade clashed against theirs, sparks flying. He moved with the strength of a warrior, each strike precise, each block firm. He fought not for money, not for pride. He fought as if his very soul depended on keeping her safe. The girl wanted to scream for him to run, but she couldn't. She was frozen, eyes wide, breath shaking. The first hunter fell with a cry, his weapon knocked from his hands. The human struck swiftly, ending the fight before the man could recover. But the second and third pressed harder, circling, trying to break his guard. One blade slipped through, slicing across his arm. He staggered but did not fall. Blood stained his sleeve, but his eyes burned with fury. He swung again, pushing them back. "Go!" He shouted at the girl. "Run!" Her heart leapt. Run! Where? She had nowhere to go, no strength to flee. And yet she wanted to obey. She stumbled backward into the trees, clutching the cloak tighter. Branches tore at her skin, but her feet carried her deeper into the forest. Behind her, the sound of steel and shouts filled the air. She turned once, just once, and saw him still standing, still fighting, his body a shield between her and the hunters. Tears blurred her vision. No master, no owner had ever fought for her, not once, but this man, this human, was bleeding for her. A crash echoed. She gasped, fearing the worst. But then his voice rang out again, "Keep moving." She stumbled further into the woods until the trees opened into a rocky slope. She stopped, chest heaving, heart breaking. She couldn't leave him. She couldn't let him die. And then she saw him. The human burst from the trees, his blade dripping, his shirt torn. His arm bled freely, but his eyes were alive, fierce. He scanned for her, found her, and without hesitation, rushed forward. "They'll send more," he said, voice low but urgent. "We have to keep moving." She stared at him, trembling. "Why? Why risk your life? You could have left me. You could have saved yourself." His answer was simple, almost a whisper. "Because I promised myself I would never fail again." The girl's breath caught. His pain, his past, all the whispers of the nights, they rushed back into her mind. He had lost his family. And now somehow, she was part of the way he carried. Her fear shifted into something new. Not trust, not yet, but something closer. They climbed the rocky slope together, the human steps slow but steady despite his wound. She offered her arm once, hesitantly, to steady him. For a brief moment, he accepted. Behind them, distant shouts echoed through the forest. The hunters were not finished. They would keep coming, but in that moment, standing side by side, the girl realized something had changed. She was no longer just a slave waiting for cruelty. She was someone worth protecting, and that thought burned brighter than her fear. The night was quiet, but the girl could not rest. The fire crackled softly between them, shadows dancing on the forest floor. She sat wrapped in his cloak, watching the human tend to his wound. His arm was cut deep and ugly, but he worked silently, cleaning it with water and wrapping it with cloth torn from his own shirt. Every part of her wanted to ask questions. Why did he fight for her? Why was he still here? Why hadn't he left her behind when she was nothing but a burden? Finally she whispered, "You should have let them take me." His hands stilled. He lifted his gaze, and the firelight caught. The lines on his face, lines carved not only by age but by grief. "I could never do that," he said. His voice was low, steady, but filled with something heavy. The girl shook her head, confused and frustrated. "Why? I don't understand you. You risked your life, you bled for me. You act like I am someone important, but I am not. I am just a slave. You spent your coins, you fight, you run. For what?" Her voice broke, rising with pain and anger. The human stared at the fire for a long moment, as if searching its flames for courage. Then, at last he spoke, "Because once I had a daughter. She was taken, sold, like you, and I was too late to save her." The girl froze. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had heard him whisper names before, but now hearing the truth spoken out loud, it pierced her deeper than any blade. He continued, his voice trembling now, "I searched. For years I searched. Every market, every shadow, every rumor. But by the time I found her trail, she was gone." His jaw tightened, his eyes glistening. "I swore that if I ever had another chance, if I could save even one soul from that fate, I would not fail again." Silence. The fire crackled. The forest held its breath. The girl's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but words wouldn't come. No one had ever fought for her. No one had ever cared whether she lived or died. And here was this human, broken by his own loss, choosing to protect her. Tears stung her eyes. She looked down at her shackled wrists, at the scars that marked her as property. Slowly she whispered, You don't see me as your slave?" His answer was immediate, firm. "No, never." Her tears spilled freely now, rolling down her cheeks. She had dreamed of freedom once, long ago, before the chains became her life. But she had buried that dream, believing it would never come. And now this stranger, this human she once feared, was offering it back to her, but still, doubt lingered. She clenched her fists, voice trembling. What if this is another trick? What if you only tell me this so I will trust you? So that when you finally show your true face, it will hurt more? The man's gaze met hers. His eyes were tired, scarred by years of loss, but there was no cruelty in them. Only sorrow. Only truth. I have nothing left to gain by hurting you, he said softly. But if I can give you the freedom my daughter never had, then maybe I can live with myself. The girl's breath caught. Her chest ached with a feeling she barely recognized hope. For a long time, neither of them spoke. She stared at him, searching for lies, for any sign of deceit. But all she found was pain and honesty. Finally, she moved closer to the fire. Her trembling hands reached for the locket that hung around his neck. He did not stop her. She opened it, saw the faded image inside, the woman and the child he had lost. She closed it gently and returned it to him. I think she would have been proud of you, she whispered. The man's eyes shone with unshed tears. He turned away, his voice breaking. I only wish I had the chance to hear her say that. The girl wiped her own tears quickly, ashamed of them, but she couldn't hide the warmth blooming in her chest. She no longer saw him as a monster. He was not her captor, not her tormentor. He was something she had never expected to find in a human, her savior. That night, as she lay under the cloak, the fear that had always wrapped itself around her heart began to loosen. It did not vanish, fear never vanishes so quickly, but in its place, a fragile trust began to grow. And though danger still lurked in the forest, though hunters would come again, she closed her eyes with a single thought: maybe I am not alone anymore. The forest air was still, but the human's instincts warned him that silence meant danger. For days they had been hunted. The slavers wanted the girl back, and bounty hunters wanted the coin. He knew they would not give up so easily. The alien girl walked beside him now, her steps steadier than before. She no longer dragged her feet like a prisoner, but moved with a quiet strength. Yet fear still lingered in her eyes. Each sound of snapping branches made her flinch. Each gust of wind carried a memory of chains as they approached the edge of the forest. The land opened into rolling hills. In the distance, smoke rose from a hidden settlement, a place the human had spoken of once in passing. Safe people, he had said. Runaways, survivors, no masters. Her heart leapt at the thought, but also twisted with doubt. Safe, could such a place really exist? The answer came sooner than expected. A shout split the silence. Figures appeared on the ridge behind them, armed slavers, a dozen or more. The girl gasped, clutching the cloak tighter around herself. They found us. The human drew his blade, jaw set, eyes burning with resolve. Keep running. Don't look back. But she couldn't move. Her legs shook, fear rooting her to the ground. They'll kill you. He glanced at her, his face calm despite the odds. Then I will die standing between them and you. Before she could protest, the hunters charged. Steel clashed in a storm of sparks and fury. The human fought like a man possessed, each strike powered by something greater than survival, by memory, by love, by the vow he had sworn to himself. The girl's chest burned with panic. She wanted to flee, but every part of her screamed to stay. And then she saw him stumble, the weight of so many enemies pressing him down. Something inside her snapped. No! She cried, snatching a fallen spear from the ground. Though her hands trembled, she rushed forward, swinging wildly at one of the attackers. The strike was clumsy, but it was enough. The slaver fell back, surprised by the defiance of the slave girl. The human looked at her, shock flickering in his eyes, but also pride. For the first time, she was not only protected. She was fighting too. Together, side by side, they pushed back against the hunters. Their breaths came heavy, blades flashing. until finally the last slaver fell, retreating into the hills with curses. The forest grew silent once more. The human dropped to one knee, exhausted, blood running down his arm. The girl rushed to him, kneeling at his side. "You're hurt," she whispered, tears streaming. He gave a faint smile. "Better me than you." Her throat tightened. She pressed her hands over his wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. "Don't say that. Don't leave me." His hand touched hers, rough but gentle. "I promised I would save you. And I have. But your freedom, it belongs to you now." The words broke her. She shook her head, sobbing. "I don't want freedom without you." His tired eyes widened. For so long he had carried only loss, only failure. And now this broken girl, once trembling in chains, was choosing him, not out of fear, but out of trust. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a small key. Slowly, carefully, he unlocked the shackles on her wrists. The chains fell to the ground with a hollow clatter, a sound that echoed like thunder in her heart. She touched her bare wrists, hardly believing it. For the first time in years, she was unbound, free. The human's voice was soft. "You can go to the settlement. They will protect you. You don't have to follow me anymore." She looked at the path ahead, the smoke rising from the safe place he had promised. Freedom was right there. She could run. She could build a life of her own. But when she turned back to him, the scarred, weary man who had bled for her, who had shielded her when he had no reason to, her decision was clear. "I will not leave you," she whispered. "Not now. Not ever." The human's eyes glistened. For years he had walked alone, haunted by ghosts. But in that moment, with her words, the weight on his soul lightened. Together, they rose. He sheathed his blade. She clutched the cloak tighter, and they began walking toward the horizon. Not as master and slave. Not as strangers bound by chance, but as two broken souls, finding strength in each other. And for the first time in both their lives, the future did not look like chains or shadows. It looked like hope.